Here's something that should bother you. A show ran for 7 seasons with his name in the title, his face on every poster, his voice narrating every single episode, and by the time it ended, he was the only character in that house who hadn't changed at all. Not grown, not healed, not even dented. Everyone around him got destroyed and rebuilt into a completely different person, except him. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to realize this show was never about the genius. It was about everyone forced to survive him. Let's get into it. There's a rule in storytelling that almost nobody talks about outside of writers' rooms, but once you know it, you can't watch anything the same way again. A main character isn't the person with the most screen time. It isn't the person whose name is on the poster. A main character is the person who changes. Someone who gets broken by the story and comes out the other side different, wiser, sadder, stronger, ruined, something. That change is the entire point of telling the story in the first place. Without it, you don't have a character, you have a prop that talks. So let's run that test on the one character everyone assumes is the center of this whole universe. Take him at 9 years old in the very first episode. Now take him at 14 in the very last one. Line them up side by side. What's different? Almost nothing. And that's not an accident. That's not lazy writing either. That's the whole trick the writers are pulling on you for 7 straight years, and I'm about to show you exactly how they did it. Go back to season 1. A boy chokes on food at the dinner table, a normal, everyday, forgettable moment for most 9-year-olds, and his reaction isn't fear, it isn't embarrassment, it's total systemic shutdown. He stops eating solid food entirely. His parents end up hauling him to a psychiatrist because a single scare rewired his whole relationship with eating. Watch what he does with that fear. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't cry about it. He controls it, turns it into a rule, a system, a wall between himself and the discomfort. That pattern, control instead of feel, retreat instead of connect, becomes his entire personality for the next 7 years. And here's where it gets dark. Fast forward to season 7. His father dies, the single most devastating thing that can happen to a child. And how does this genius, this boy who can solve equations most adults can't touch, process the death of his own dad? He freezes. Literally sits in a chair and goes somewhere else in his head. He doesn't cry at the funeral. He doesn't say a single word to his grieving mother or siblings about how he feels. Instead, he starts replaying alternate versions of that final morning over and over in his mind, imagining himself as some kind of time-traveling hero who could go back and fix the one thing that's actually unfixable. He's not grieving, he's debugging. And 27 days, 27, after burying, he's sitting in a grief support session, pulls out a brand new laptop gifted to him by doctors and starts working. When people look at him like something's wrong, he brushes it off and calls them small-minded. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. That reaction, shut down, retreat into logic, weaponize intelligence instead of feeling anything, is the exact same reaction he had at 9 years old choking on a hot dog. 5 years, a dead father, zero movement. The boy who couldn't process a scare at a dinner table is the same boy who can't process the death of his dad. He hasn't grown an inch. He's just gotten better at hiding it behind bigger words. And there's one more moment that seals it, the kind of detail you almost miss the first time you watch it. In the finale, his mother, completely shattered by grief, asks her children to sit quietly and imagine their father's spirit at the table with them. It's not really about ghosts. It's about a woman who needs 5 minutes of comfort from her kids. And what does he do? He refuses. Flat out. Because in his words, spirits don't exist and it goes against the laws of physics. Scientific accuracy wins over his own mother's grief. Even later, when he agrees to get baptized for her, the one moment that looks like growth, he does it wearing a wetsuit so he won't catch germs from the water. And when he does get an ear infection anyway, his own internal narration calls it worth it, because it made his mother happy. Even his kindness is a calculation. Even his love is a spreadsheet. This isn't a writing mistake. The reason is simple once you think about it. This character has to stay broken in exactly this way, because in the original show, the one this story is a prequel to, the grown version of this man is a closed-off, socially blind, self-obsessed adult who can barely recognize sarcasm. If the writers let the boy actually heal, actually learn empathy, actually grow into a normal teenager, the whole timeline falls apart. So every single time he gets close to real emotional growth, the story yanks him back to zero. He is, by design, not allowed to arrive anywhere, but here's where the real twist comes in, and it's the part almost nobody talks about. If he never changes, then what is this show actually for? Think of it like this. In a lot of movies, there's an object everyone chases, a briefcase, a secret file, some mysterious package, and it turns out the object itself is completely empty. It doesn't matter what's inside it. Its entire job is to force everyone around it into motion, into conflict, into change. That object has a name in screenwriting. And this boy is exactly that. He is a static, unmoving center, and the sheer chaos of his existence, his needs, his meltdowns, becomes the engine that forces every single person around him to grow, break, and rebuild. Don't believe me? Let's go through the receipts. Season 2. His father gets offered the job of his dreams, a real coaching position that could finally pull this family out of financial struggle after years of scraping by. It comes up at the dinner table. And the second the topic of moving cities is raised, panic sets in over the mere idea of a disrupted routine. A full meltdown at the table. The father, watching his son spiral, quietly turns down the job of his life. Nobody in that house even fully realizes what was just sacrificed. The boy at the center of it learns absolutely nothing from the moment. He doesn't grow. He's not even aware of what it cost. He's just the trigger. The father is the one who has to live with burying his own ambition, or take the computer. A simple request. He needs a computer for his calculations, understandable enough on its own. But this family is broke, and that request cracks open something that's been hidden for years. His mother has secretly been stashing away money behind her husband's back. It explodes into one of the worst fights of the entire show. She packs up the kids and leaves, all because of one request from a boy who once again does absolutely nothing except exist in the blast radius. Then there's the darkest one. His sister's heart gets broken by her first love, and she's lashing out at everyone in the house because nobody's paying attention to what she's going through. Meanwhile, he's sitting in his room complaining that she's being too loud, and it's interrupting his focus. His mother, without even asking what happened to her own daughter, immediately takes his side and demands an apology. That single moment, the mother once again bending the entire household around her son's comfort, becomes the final straw for the father. Everything he's been holding in for years comes out in one explosion. He tells her she only sees one child in this house. He walks out to a bar. His sister runs away from home, an entire family fracture, and the boy at the center of it is sitting upstairs annoyed about the noise. Even the people who orbit him get pulled into their own transformations because of him. His grandmother starts driving him to college lectures because he's bored at his own school, and that drive is what puts her in a classroom where she meets the man who becomes the center of her own multi-season love story. A twin study he's dragged into ends up revealing his sister has off-the-charts emotional intelligence that nobody in the family ever noticed because they were always too busy managing him. When he briefly leaves for a school for gifted kids, the house goes quiet in the worst way, and the family realizes, for the first time, that without his chaos holding their routine together, they don't actually know how to talk to each other. Even a casual comment he makes to his sister about doubting the Bible spirals into a full-blown crisis of faith for his mother and a public scandal with their church. He learns nothing from any of it. He's a stone thrown into still water, and every ripple belongs to somebody else. So if he's the stone, who's actually doing the drowning and the swimming? Because when you actually track the other people in this house across 7 years, it's night and day. The older brother starts out as the family punching bag, the dumb jock whose little genius siblings skipped grades just to sit in the same classroom and humiliate him without even trying. By the end, he's built a small business, dropped out of school on his own terms, gotten kicked out of the house and refused to fold, found out he's about to become a father at 17, and, instead of running, shown up. He works himself exhausted, has a panic attack in the delivery room, and still stays standing next to her through it. When his father dies, it's him, barely 19, who leans over the casket and promises to hold the family together, and he does. He builds a business from nothing. That's a full arc. That's a person who was broken and rebuilt into someone new. The sister spends years as the invisible one, her own words, not mine. A kid living in the shadow of a household that revolves entirely around one sibling's routines and phobias. She goes through heartbreak, teenage rebellion, stealing her father's truck and running from home, a devastating roadside reconciliation with her father during a tornado, and by the final season, at 15, she's essentially running the household while her mother is away. Managing the budget, holding the family together, becoming the stand-in parent. Then she loses her father, the one person who actually saw her. Her grief at that funeral is raw in a way nothing else in the show is. That's a transformation. The father goes from being remembered in the spin-off decades later as a washed-up, unfaithful failure to being revealed as a man who sacrificed his own dream career, endured public humiliation from a supposed friend, and died of a heart attack literally days before he was finally about to get everything he'd worked for. The mother goes from a devoted, faithful woman to someone whose entire church community betrays her and who ends up clinging to religion out of desperation just to survive her own grief. Every one of these people went through hell and came out changed. And the one boy whose name is on the poster stayed precisely the same person he was in episode 1. And if you want actual proof, this isn't just a theory, track how much of the story he's even directly responsible for. In the earliest episodes, close to 80% of the plot runs through him directly. By the 5th season, that number drops to around 40%. By the 6th, it's down to a quarter. The pregnancy, the family arrests, the mother's collapse at church, the father's death, almost none of it needs him anymore. The title character quietly becomes a background player in his own show. And here's the detail that should really get under your skin. After this show ended, the franchise didn't spin off into more stories about the genius. It spun off into a show about the brother, the dumb jock, and his family. No genius in the title, no genius in the plot. The franchise looked at 7 years of material and quietly chose to keep going with the people who used to be background noise. So what was this show actually about? Not a genius understanding the world. The opposite. It was about ordinary, exhausted, deeply flawed people slowly breaking themselves apart so that one unmoving boy could have a future he never once thanked them for. He bends the orbit of everyone in that house while staying himself, a cold and motionless point at the center of it. And maybe that's the real ending nobody says out loud. Maybe the grown man narrating this whole story, years later, with kids of his own, finally understands exactly what he cost the people who loved him. Maybe this entire show, from the very first frame, was never a celebration. It was an apology. Do you think he ever actually understood what his family gave up for him? Tell me where you land in the comments. I read every single one. And if this kind of breakdown is your thing, you already know where to find more. I'll see you in the next one.